In November 1957, a woman suddenly disappeared in a small, remote town in the United States. As the police investigated, they quickly narrowed down the suspect, a strange man living alone in the deserted countryside. He was not only a murderer, but also a monster in human form, known by creepy names such as Plainfield Vampire or the Devil Butcher. He had a horrifying hobby, collecting and crafting furniture from human corpses. Body parts taken from cemeteries or even from his own victims were turned into masks, leather chairs, and countless other creepy items. His name was Ed Gein, one of the most terrifying killers in American history, the man who inspired a series of horror films such as Psycho and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You are following the true story of Ed Gein, the Plainfield Butcher, and his human skin furniture collection, where every unsolved mystery contains secrets that want to be revealed. Step into the darkness and explore them with hidden truth. Don't hesitate to leave a like as an encouragement for us, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to update the most classic cases. Eden's full name is Edward Theodore Gein. He was born in La Crosse, Wisconsin, USA in 1906 in a family with an alcoholic father and an extremely domineering mother. He and his older brother, who was 7 years older, were raised on an isolated farm in the remote Plainfield area of Wisconsin. The nearest neighbor also lived a mile away from the Gein family. Gein always tried to please his mother. However, his mother often humiliated and insulted him and his brothers because she thought they would grow up to be like their father. It was his mother who taught Gein that women and sex were bad things, causing moral degradation. This is closely related to the reason why he became a devil in human form. This sick man satisfied his pleasure by digging up corpses in cemeteries to make furniture, or perhaps he was so lonely that he wanted something to vent his feelings. Whatever the case, this is too barbaric and terrible. The story of this sick killer begins on the remote farm where he spent most of his life. The farm is located in the village of Plainfield, Wisconsin, USA. On Saturday, November 16th, 1957, the village of Plainfield was quieter than usual because it was the opening day of the men's hunting festival in the village. Bernice Worden, the owner of a small grocery store, took this time to clean up the store. As she was putting away 2 boxes of lentils and cheese, she saw a man parked in front of the store. Thinking it might be a hunter who needed to make a last-minute purchase, she politely greeted him as he entered. This man was Ed Gein, a man the villagers considered a harmless but foolish man. However, Bernice was his target. At around 5 p.m., Bernice's son, Frank, returned from hunting. He found the store locked but with a light on inside. What was even stranger was that his mother's truck was gone. Frank decided to go to a nearby gas station to see if anyone had seen his mother. The gas station attendant said they hadn't seen Bernice all day. Feeling uneasy, Frank, who was also a Plainfield deputy, quickly reported his mother missing. He contacted 3 other officers, including Chief Arthur Schley. A search party consisting of Arnold Freeze and Anna Chase arrived at Bernice's store. When they broke in, they found a bloody scene with bullet holes in the wall and immediately knew that Bernice had been kidnapped. They found an order for antifreeze from Ed Gein. When this name appeared, no one could have guessed that they were about to face one of the worst cases in American history. Frank described Ed Gein as an eccentric who lived on a nearby farm. Frank had previously invited him to go hunting with him. A police party was sent to find Ed Gein. When they arrived at his farm, they found a desolate place with boarded-up windows, looking more like a slum than a farm. When they entered, they detected a strong stench. In a side room, a horrifying scene appeared. Bernice was hanging, headless. Sheriff Arthur Schley immediately ran outside to vomit. When the police searched, they found gruesome evidence. For 10 years, Ed Gein dug up bodies from the local cemetery to make furniture, decorations, and even clothing out of human skin. Occasionally, on impulse, he would kill people for fresh material. Edward Theodore Gein was born on August 27, 1906, in Plainfield. From an early age, his life was miserable. His father was an alcoholic, and his mother, Augusta, was a deeply religious woman. She filled her son's head with distorted ideas about morality and sin. Every day, she read the Bible and warned him about the depravity of the world, After his father's death in 1940, Ed Gein was even more strictly controlled by his mother. She forbade him to interact with outsiders, especially women. He became isolated, able to escape only through books on anatomy and horror. When his mother died in 1945, Ed Gein was completely lost. Later, Ed Gein began reading material related to death and the occult. Occasionally, he came across stories about cannibalism. He also read articles about the horrors of World War II, which were still being broadcast and recorded in newspapers and radio at that time. This was the only thing that interested him. These things gradually made him more indifferent to the horrible crimes he would commit later. Ed Gein seemed to have no awareness of his crimes. Normally, he worked as a janitor to earn money. He was known as the country fool, as everyone in town called him. He looked strangely at the girls while working in town, but then returned to his farm in the evening as usual. It seemed that people sympathized with his strange looks because they felt sorry for him. Many times in his crisis, he tried to summon his mother's spirit, but she never appeared. What made him start digging up corpses was when Ed Gein read a story about an aristocratic club that existed in the previous century. This club formed a cult that specialized in digging up the corpses of young girls in the local cemetery to satisfy their sick desires. These stories fueled Ed Gein's perverted desires. He told himself that it would be better to go looking for newly buried young women. He thought it would be like having a horse on his farm. How to find newly buried young women? Simply read the obituary section of the Plainfield newspaper regularly and go to the cemetery at midnight. And so he began his work. He told himself that he would finally have a girlfriend and would no longer be lonely. He dug until he found the coffin, then went down the hole, opened the wooden lid, and took the body. She was indeed a young woman like the obituary in the newspaper. Ed Gein rushed home more excited than ever. From that moment on, Ed Gein isolated himself to live among the corpses for the next 10 years. With his first victim, he performed some experiments, experiencing what he had read about on their bodies. At first, he abused his victims until their bodies began to decompose. So, to protect the body that he considered his only friend, Ed Gein began to peel off the skin, then put it in the sun. He worked on different pieces of skin for hours, then created all kinds of objects that were later discovered by the police. When the bodies were too decomposed, Ed Gein dumped them all over the farm. After his first successful expedition to the cemetery, he didn't stop. He later claimed that he targeted 3 other cemeteries, mostly in the Plainfield area. Indeed, his modus operandi was well established. It took the police 10 years to discover his horrific actions. This shows that he was not as stupid as rumored. Ed Gein continued to read the obituaries, went to the cemetery, dug up graves, and brought the bodies home. There were even periods when he was quite busy because he had to make money anyway. He kept all his beauties in the house and wisely waited until the weekend. He considered it a small relaxation time. He took the new bodies out of the big bag, placed them on the sofa in the living room, and drank some aperitifs. He talked about his week, but the conversations never got any response. And then when winter came, he told himself that it was a little cold. It would be nice to have a second skin. Instead of making things out of the bodies of his victims, he made himself a pair of pants out of their skin. He later said that his house was always heated, with the heater turned up high so that the skin of his victims wouldn't get goosebumps. The worst part was that Ed Gein didn't even hide his work. There was a little corner of the farm where the children liked to play. They could see inside the house. Sometimes they would knock on the door and ask for water or cookies. Some of the children later left Ed Gein's house in a state of shock. They told their parents that they had seen human heads placed on the furniture and that the house was haunted. But no one believed them. They thought the kids were making it up. Although the town considered him a local idiot and thought he would never hurt a fly, the horrifying truth was eventually revealed. When the police raided Ed Gein's farm, the town of Plainfield was in a state of panic and terror. The area had never seen so many people. About 100 journalists from all over came to cover the story. What they found on his farm: a trash can made of human skin, skulls on his bedside table, bowls and cutlery made of bones, gloves made of human skin. But what worried investigators most was his denial of any murder. Ed Gein claimed that everything he had came from cemeteries, that he had never killed anyone. But this claim was completely absurd when the police found the genitals of teenage girls preserved in his house. In the past 10 years, there have been no deaths of young girls or teenagers in this area, but there have been a number of mysterious disappearances. Georgia Wickler, 8, disappeared on her way home from school on May 1, 1947. No screaming, no blood, nothing. Just the tire tracks of a Mark Ford that matched the car Ed Gein had been driving. In October 1953, Evelyn Hartley, 15, showed up for an evening babysitting. After putting the child to bed, she disappeared without a trace. Her shoes and glasses were found on the floor, and only the back door of the basement was unlocked that night. Her blood was later found on the door, even in the yard, and no one saw her again that night. What led investigators to believe that Ed Gein might be lying was that he would not admit to anything without hard evidence. For example, there was the case of Marie Ogan, who disappeared on December 8, 1954, while working at a local bar. Or the case of Bernice, a woman who suddenly disappeared while no customers were in the bar. Blood was found on the ground along with empty shotgun shells, and a trail of blood led to the parking lot. At first, Ed Gein claimed he knew nothing until the police discovered Mary's decapitated head at his home. This proved that he was not as stupid as many people thought. Psychiatrists who examined his case stated that Ed Gein had a completely normal, even above average IQ, at least 100. However, he suffered from untreated schizophrenia for many years, sometimes accompanied by hallucinations. This is why he often felt like his mother was talking to him. Remarkably, according to experts, he had little idea of what was good and what was bad. From the beginning, everything he did was who he was. He only confessed to murder when he had evidence. Although the human remains found in Ed Gein's home did not come from a cemetery, they included the complete skeleton of a young girl who was only missing her head. Investigators were unable to identify her because Ed Gein refused to confess to anything. When questioned, he always blamed others. He attacked Bernice, the woman who ran the grocery store, because she looked like his mother and he wanted her in his house. He said that if he did these terrible things, it was because no one ever cared about him. After 10 years of psychiatric treatment, in 1958, Ed Gein was finally declared mentally competent to stand trial. Doctors now consider him mentally competent. The trial was held without a jury at the request of Ed Gein's attorney, as anyone could have declared him guilty before hearing the case from the prosecutor and defense attorney. Ed Gein was eventually convicted and ordered to spend the rest of his life in a mental institution. On July 26, 1984, at the age of 72, he died of respiratory failure. He died taking with him the secret of his true victim count. The exact number of people Ed Gein may have murdered over the course of 10 years has never come to light, as he was one of the rare serial killers without any official evidence or confession. And what do you think about the story of this notorious murderer in American history? Leave your comments below so we can discuss more. Thank you for joining us today. If you like this story and want to explore more fascinating mysteries, subscribe to Hidden Truths and hit the notification bell to never miss any updates.